double duty today. They played this morning and then this evening, and we're getting a lot out of them. Appreciate it. And I didn't expect that Alan could video this outside. I hope it works. It saves me preaching it again to a bunch of empty chairs. So I'm glad for that. And so we hope that works. And also the audio is being done. So we're getting double duty on that. I hope that you will social distance, but at least share things with each other after this is over. We've come a long way. We haven't been together for a long time, since the middle of March. And so very thankful that we can be here tonight. Let's have a word of prayer. I'm going to ask Steve Benson if he'd lead us in prayer tonight.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day, the Lord's Day again, that we can all come together and look to you, Father. We just thank you for the body of Christ. We thank you for one another. Thank you for all that you do for us, Father, individually and as a family, Father. As a church, we're thankful. We just pray that you would bless your word this evening. Thank you for everyone who's come out. Pray for all those who will hear this message, Father, via the internet. And we just ask your blessings on your word. And we thank you that you're a good God and a great God who's loved us and sent his Son to die for us. And we pray in Jesus' name.
Amen. Okay, so hopefully we'll get used to this because we're going to be doing it for a while, probably. And so glad to have you with us tonight. You are welcome to bring your own chairs. That's very welcome. And we won't be singing for a while, but hopefully we will before too long. And so we're glad to have you together here with us tonight. There's guideline sheets somewhere in the sanctuary. There's water, bottles of water back there, and all those kind of things. Quite a while ago, we began a study on Hosea and Song of Solomon, and the idea was to do it simultaneously and to show how God can use a very good marriage relationship to enable us to minister to others, and how even if we've had a troubled marriage, God can use that like he did Hosea. So this virus thing kind of knocked that. I was going to go back and forth. But we've been in Hosea twice. We had an introductory message and then we had chapter 1. And so this will be our third message. The first message isn't up on the website yet. That's my fault, not Troy's. And I preached that on Zoom with Salem Bible Church, but I never got around to recording it here. So we will get that chapter 1 message recorded, and I'm going to refer to it today, and then we're going to start in chapter 2. So I'll call your attention to that. When we were in chapter 1, we saw something. There were 9 surprises. God is a God of surprises, and the Bible will surprise us many times, and these are some big ones. And when we get to chapters 2 and 3, we're going to see some more. So I think this will be a blessing to you to at least see it this way, because the book of Hosea is rather shocking in its approach. And Hosea does some things, and God asks some things of him that we really don't expect at all. And yet it happened, and it was there, and it's there for a reason. And as you know, God used Hosea's tragic marriage situation to mirror his tragic such situation. And one way to witness, if you have someone with a troubled marriage, is say, your marriage may be very troubled, but nothing like God's. And show them the book of Hosea. That's Gomer and Hosea's marriage, as tragic as it was, pictured God and Israel's marriage. So let me just go through some of the surprises we covered in our first message, and then we'll pick up where we left off. The first surprises are in chapter 1. Surprise number 1. Surprise number 1 is what the Lord commands his prophet to do. The first thing he said to him, the first thing he commanded him was to marry a woman who'd be unfaithful to him. What a surprise that would have been to him, and it's meant to be a shocking thing. Second, the second surprise in the book of Hosea is that Hosea did it without complaint, without murmur. He wasn't a Jonah saying, no way, I'm out of here. He did it, not complaining like Ezekiel and Jeremiah did and so forth. He just did it. That's a surprise. That's a second surprise. Third surprise is the Lord's commands the prophet what he commands the prophet to do in regard to his children. And the names the Lord asked him to hang on those 3 kids. And that came over a time. Isaiah had a similar thing. His kids had prophetic names. But these names, wow. Jezreel, we studied that. Or Not My People, and No Mercy. Those are pretty rough names for a child to have on them. That was the third surprise. And the fourth surprise is that Hosea did it without objecting. Again, he had to be an amazing individual, really, to be that compliant to these extreme commands. And in the fifth surprise is what the Lord commanded his prophet to do in reversing the names of his children, at least the last 2. Jezreel is the same, but No More Mercy is now named Mercy, and Not My People is now going to be going by the name My People. I bet the kids were very relieved. I'm sure Hosea was relieved. But all of that process with the children was to preach a message to a nation that wasn't listening. And they could tune Hosea out, but everywhere his kids went, what's your name? My name's No Mercy. What kind of name is that? My name is Not My People. And what kind of name is that? And so it provided a platform for God's word to go out to a nation that wasn't hearing. I am not recommending we give our kids names like that. I'm just saying God, in this unique situation, asked Hosea to do it. So what an amazing thing. He reversed the names of his children. The sixth surprise is that Hosea and his family and the Lord and his people, there's a reversal of status, not only of the children and not only of the people, but the reversal of status that the children's names depict is totally contrary to God's original statement. I mean, usually when God says something, that's it, right? If he says, you're not my people, that's it. If he says, you are my people, that's it. But this is an anthropomorphism. God is speaking in a way not dealing with his eternal covenants, but dealing with our illustration of his absolute frustration and agony with the behavior of the theocratic people. So it's a fascinating thing that God would even put this in the Bible, this kind of reversal of what he's clearly said. He doesn't normally do that. The eighth surprise is the immediate difference between what will happen to Judah in the south and Israel in the north. And that was a wonderful prophecy because in Hezekiah's time, the Assyrians took over everybody else, but not Jerusalem. They came to the door, and it was a wonderfully fulfilled prophecy. Now later, the south will be just as bad as the north, as Ezekiel will say, but not yet at this time. But this is a prophecy that was fulfilled. The ninth surprise is is one that is really exciting to us. The two tribes are going to be reunited under one single ruler. That hasn't happened yet, but that's going to happen when Jesus comes. He is the single ruler. And so it's a shocking prophecy that is going to be fulfilled, and that one really excites me a lot. Now that brings us to chapter 2, and I'm going to look at 2 surprises out of 3 in chapter 2. It's a long chapter, but we're just going to look at 2 here, and we're still going to be surprised. We're still going to be surprised. The surprises aren't over. They go clear into 3. And the 10th surprise is the one we're starting with tonight. It's our first one of the 2 tonight. What the Lord demands of the children in regard to their mother. Now there's a commingling of Gomer and Hosea and their children, and the Lord and Israel's children here. And it's when you read chapter 2, you read it and you say, which one are they talking about? It just seems like it goes back and forth, and it's very intermingled. But what is going on here is this commingling of Hosea's family and their problems, and the Lord's family and their problems, and it's very difficult to know which is which. So I believe personally both are there. Hosea's children actually had to approach their mother and said, "What are you doing? This is hurting us. You run off with all these other men. This is hurting us. This is affecting us." Now that's unusual in that culture for children to go up to their mother and say something like that in such a confrontational way. But what was going on there is that the Lord expects the same kind of thing from the remnant in Israel to do to the leaders of that nation. This, what I'm going to call this surprise, the tenacious confrontation with the cultural apostasy ingrained in the northern kingdom. And God expected them to confront it. He expects us to confront it. Not just live a good life, but there's times when we have to be confrontational with what's wrong. Now, we're not a theocracy, we're the church, but I just want you to think about this with me just a minute. Let's read the chapter 2, verse 2. Rebuke your mother. Rebuke her, for she's not my wife, and I'm not her husband. Let her remove the promiscuous look from her face and her adultery from between her breasts. Otherwise I'll strip her naked and expose her as she was on the day she was born. I'll make her like a desert, like a parched land, and I'll let her die of thirst, and I'll have no compassion on her children, because they're children of promiscuity, for their mother is promiscuous. She conceived them and acted shamefully, for she thought, I will go after my lovers, the men who give me my food and my water and my wool and my flax and my oil and my drink. Now that's exactly what Gomer did, and that's exactly what Israel did. The motive of the woman that was married to Hosea and the motive of the nation that followed Jeroboam the first in the golden calves in Bethel and Dan and then the Omri dynasty and Ahab and Jezebel and Baal worship. You know what it was? It was a financial motive in both cases. Gomer was looking for, she was a gold digger. She was simply looking for a man who would provide for her better than Hosea did. The motive for her was not romance or sex itself. It was, I'm looking for somebody that will give me gifts. I'm looking for somebody that will enhance my financial status. She was not a very good person, was she? It's obvious that her main motive was financial. Baal worship was very much involved in promoting agricultural and fertility among animals and people. And the motive for Baal worship was financial. And so the northern 10 tribes dove into that. And how many people do you know, they dive into the culture that they're around? It's so alluring, the peer pressure. I got to be part of this. Because if I'm not part of this, I will not advance in society. I will not be popular. My business won't be able to flourish. And I'll have to live on a lower level. So whatever the compromise, I'll make it. Because their real God is themselves. And an enhancement of themselves financially. It's the ultimate idolatry. And so that's kind of what's going on here. And the picture here is that Hosea's children first, and then the remnant, or people who want to be the remnant, they got to stand up to this stuff. I read something from Michael Reagan on divorce, and Michael Reagan was the adopted son of Ronald Reagan. and Jane Wyman. And Jane Wyman divorced Ronald Reagan a couple of years after they adopted Michael. He writes about that in his book, Twice Adopted. But he said something about divorce, and he was just a little guy when that divorce happened. He said, divorce is where two adults take everything that matters to a child, the child's home, family, security, and sense of being loved and protected, and they smash it all up, leave it in ruins on the floor, walk out, and leave the child to clean up the mess. Well, that's a strong statement from someone who experienced it. Now, by the way, he loved his dad and had a lot of good things to say about him, but he did write. I haven't read the book, I've just read the quote from the book. Now, what are we talking about when we're talking about children tenaciously confronting a culture? What is culture? What is culture? One of the best definitions of culture I ever had was from a guy I don't agree with at all. He's a radical post-millennialist, Rufus Rushdoony, but he said, culture is religion externalized. Culture is religion externalized. And culture is made up of music, culture is made up of arts, culture is made up of all kinds of things, right? The philosophies of the way you do things, the way you see things, culture. But he said culture is religion externalized. Well, if your religion is apostasy and idolatry, then your culture is filled with idolatry. Canaanite culture was an idolatrous culture. And to adapt Baal culture under Ahab and Jezebel was to adopt an idolatrous culture with everything in it. And so what happens is when a nation's culture goes off and changes, like the 10 northern tribes did, they broke off from the south and they went into the 2 golden calves. And I've actually been at Dan where they had that 1 golden calf thing. It was shocking. It was still there. They found it. Not the calf itself, but the base it was on. And all of that detached them from the theocracy. They still worshiped the Lord. Gomer still had sex with her husband. She just had these other guys on the side. Until finally, she totally left him. So God is not happy when people depart from him and they give him some kind of lip service, like a woman who's still kissing her husband, but she's got 5 boyfriends. So that's the picture here. And it's an ugly picture. It's an awful picture. And the Israelite culture is made up of the leaders that are driving the culture. The kings, the false prophets, the priests of Baal, the priest of the golden calves. Those are the people that were driving the culture, the leadership. In our culture, it's the media, right? It's the people that make the movies. It's the people that run the universities, in large part. It's the people that have a totally different idea from what our country was founded on. And so we have a similar problem. And sin is a lack of love for God. It's a failure to be faithful to him. That's what James 4:4. Friendship with the world is adultery with God. And churches can become unfaithful, as 2 Corinthians 11 said. I betrothed you as a pure virgin to Christ, and you got into legalism. You're cheating on Jesus. So that's the picture here. And institutionalized idolatry. It's difficult to go against culture. I didn't do very well as a teenager. I had to go to the dances and listen to music, and you know, I know you can't imagine me dancing. The kids I went to high school couldn't imagine me not dancing. It was terrible. It's embarrassing. And so I was known for certain things, and there were certain things that attracted me, even though I was saved, and I went with it. But I had to have it. So it's embarrassing now. It's terrible now, but finally God opened my eyes. And then I came to OU and got a good dose of Marxism in the government department. And boy, did that, and philosophy, Western philosophy, and that really balled me up. And so I was trying to be a Christian. I was trying to do this other stuff at the same time. And that's exactly what Gomer was doing. She's okay with Hosea as long as she's got this other thing on the side. And that's exactly what Israel was doing. So that's the picture. That's the picture. So the mother is the whole nation and the leaders of the nation. The children are the people who are brought up in that idolatrous culture. Pardon me, that's departed from the Lord. And that's the point. If a nation or a church goes off, God expects individuals within that church, even the young people raised in it, to confront it with a tenacious confrontation. We're not what we used to be. We're going in a wrong direction. And may God help the young people here to do that if Athens Bible Church ever goes way out, or even a little bit out. So God help us to do that. And so that's, by the way, what Martin Luther did in the 1500s. With the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church running things, it had become apostate. Somebody need to stand up to it. He was like one of the children rebuking the mother. That's what Wesley and Whitefield did. That's what our Pilgrim Fathers did. They were rebuking their mother. They said, the Anglican Church is so bad, we got Church of England, we got to get out. That's what Elijah and Elisha did, and the 7,000 that wouldn't bow to the knee to Baal. Seems like there's a lot of this, and that's what God expects our church to do as individuals in our particular culture. We don't have to go along with all this stuff. We got to have some discernment about the popular things around us. I didn't. I went with it. I even had long hair. Can you believe that?
You had hair.
I had hair, and I was letting my freak flag fly. But it was because culture was winning me, and I was trying to be a Christian in this other two, rather than knowing the Bible well enough and knowing life well enough to see what happened. I failed in my youth. I didn't rebuke my mother. I'm not talking about my biological mother. She was a Christian. I'm talking about my nation. And so God expects this of his people. And the rebukers here are the remnant, are the people that want to be a remnant. I'm not going to be part of this. If I got to live in a cave and get fed bread and water, I'll do that. And so that's the picture. One said they're to repudiate her behavior. They must act themselves apart from their mother. They're to recognize and denounce their culture for what it was. Apostate, cruel, selfish. That's no easy task. No easy task. Who wants to admit your mother's no good? I had a really good mother. But that's a hard thing to admit, right? Who wants to admit their culture's gone bad? Now, we haven't gone completely bad, but we got some bad things, right? Who wants to admit their church is like the old gray mare? It's not what it used to be. Who wants to admit that? I had to admit that. I was saved in a church, and they still had the gospel, but they got more and more influenced by things they shouldn't. Remember Isaiah in chapter 6, verse 5, when he saw the Lord high and lifted up, and he said, "Woe to me! I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people with unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King." When he saw God, he saw Israel for what it was. And then he saw himself for what he was. You see, my problem as a young person, I wasn't in the Bible. I wasn't seeing God for who he is. So the children to rebuke their mother, but it's really God rebuking the nation through them. And let's move on in this with the second surprise. God's tough love. This is really tough love. You've heard that statement, you've read books about tough love. This is tough love. This is how God loves us when we are involved in things we shouldn't be. And I got some really hard spankings from the Lord as a young person, and I knew why. And it was God's tough love. So let's pick it up in verse 6. Now this sounds kind of mean, what God's doing to the nation here now. But we're not going to get to this tonight. The tender love comes next. The tender love comes at the end of the chapter and in chapter 3. But the tough love comes before the tender love. And when you read about the tender love, you're just like, how can God do this? How can Hosea do this? What kind of love is this that loves to this degree? So just come back next time for the tender love. But before we finish, I want to see the tough love. And the fact that the tender love is right after the tough love. The tough love is simply to prepare God's wife and prepare Gomer for the tender love. Because without that tough love, the tender love's not going to get anywhere. God knows exactly what he's doing with you and with me. Let's watch verse 6. Therefore, this is what I'll do. I'll block her way with thorns. And I will enclose her with a wall so she can't find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but not catch them. She will seek them, but not find them. Then she'll think, I'll go back to my former husband, for then it was better for me than now. Notice how selfish she is even there. It's still, I'm in pretty bad shape now, so I'll go back to him, not because I love him or not because I should. It's kind of like the prodigal son, isn't it? In the pig pen. My father's servants have bread to spare, and Here I am in the pig pen, and I'll go to my father. It wasn't because he loved his father, it was because he was starving. And so, in verse 8, she does not recognize that it's I who gave her the grain, the new wine, the oil. I lavished silver and gold on her, which they used for Baal. Can you imagine that? Therefore, I'll take back my grain in its time, and my new wine in its season. I'll take away my wool and linen, which were to cover her nakedness, and I'll expose her shame in the sight of her lovers, and no one will rescue her from my hands. I'll put an end to all her celebrations, her feasts, her new moons and Sabbaths and festivals. I'll devastate the vines and fig trees. She thinks these are her wages that her lovers have given her. I'll turn them into a thicket, and wild animals will eat them, and I'll punish her for the days of the Baals, when she burned incense to them, put on her rings and jewelry, and went after her lovers, but forgot me. You see, that's why I believe this is primarily talking about God and Israel, this last phrase. She forgot me. Now, no doubt Gomer forgot Hosea, but Israel forgot the Lord. One writer said, too many people have syncretized their beliefs with modern cultural trends and thus lost the distinctive heart of their faith. Another said, each of us has beguiling false gods, and the church in our time has more than a few. And the picture here is the children of this mother that goes away are in danger. The young people growing up in apostate culture got to deal with the judgment that's coming on it. Those young people had to go into Syrian exile for their parents and grandparents and ancestors' decisions. I had a childhood friend that moved a few blocks away from us. He was a little closer when we were young, but his next door neighbor and his mother ran off together. And then came back. There were 3 children in his family. What a horrible thing. And I won't tell anything else except people say my sin just hurts me and nobody else. Hurts everybody else. A nation that goes apostate and a church that's unfaithful needs to be rebuked. And God calls individual Israelites to stand up against institutionalized idolatry here of the northern kingdom. It had been doing that for 200 years. The split came in 931. And Hosea is prophesying around 740. It was about 2 centuries of apostasy. When Hosea he's prophesying under Jeroboam II, who was one of the last leaders, and nobody really had much after that. So, after 2 centuries of apostasy, people fail to even know what's right and what's true. How many churchgoers even know a little bit about who Jesus is or what real Christianity is in America today? Many of them don't. Some of them do. So this is tough love, where God's going to hedge up her way, block her way. We had when Andrew was little, I'll use a couple illustrations. Some of you are cat lovers, and you know if you give a cat away, they got to keep that cat in for about 6 weeks, or the cat will go back. It might be miles. It's going to take off first since it gets out. You got to keep them in. Love keeps them in because they're going to get on. You're going to hit the road. And we've got cats, but we also had rabbits when Andrew was little. I had a rabbit hutch, and one rabbit couldn't have been better. The other rabbit was an escape artist. His name was Oreo. He was half black and half white. And every chance he'd get, somehow he'd get out. And when he'd get out, we tried to herd him back. We tried to block up his way. And there's no way he wanted to go back in that pen. And one of the strangest things that ever happened in our family, we got 3 or 4 of us out there trying to herd him, and the black cat Jingling joined us. Not to kill the rabbit, but to herd the rabbit. He saw what we were doing, and he actually helped us do it. It was kind of phenomenal, really. So we herded the rabbit in until somebody got a hold of him, I forget which one of us was, and got him in the pen. He got out anyway. He's gone a long time ago. But that blocking up the way has been going on from Hosea's time to now. 27 centuries. God has tough love for his Jewish people and tough love for his church people. And you know, most of us, if we had a wife like Gomer, we'd say good riddance to bad rubbish, and I'm glad she's gone. I wish she'd have left earlier. But Hosea's asked to marry her again, right? Because God is actually going to be in relationship with Israel again. And chapter 3 is all about that. In fact, end of chapter 2 is all about that. But what God's doing first, he's putting her in a situation where she can no longer successfully sin. And Hosea's family is functioning as an allegory of God's relationship to Israel. So God's going to cut off the blessings. And the whole point is, he sounds like he's done, he sounds like he's finished, but God's not going back on his vows, but he will exercise tough love. And she's as shallow and hypocritical and self-centered and mercenary as a person could be. But God says, I'm not giving up on her. And the tender love starts in verse 14. Goes to the end of the chapter and into 5. Therefore I'm going to persuade her, lead her in the wilderness, and speak tenderly to her. So read all the tough love in light of that tender love that we'll get next time. Well, last summer, our son Stephen was home, and Andrea and Stephen watched Ethel May so Linda could go down to Gospel Mission of South America AGM meeting for a few days with us. And during that AGM meeting, that's the field directors and the general director and the U.S. board, and the Canadian board, and the Great Britain board. And one of the things Tom Gibbons had planned was a marriage seminar for the field directors of the different countries with their wives. But they didn't have enough room to house them. And so years ago, when Linda was working, we bought a timeshare. I am not recommending you do that, just saying we did. And we still have it. And we decided we can't go anywhere right now with Linda's mom with us because she's bedfast. So we gave a couple of timeshares to the mission where we traded it. And we'd done that for other missionaries, we'd done it for other people. And so I wasn't expecting any problems. And so I flew down on one plane. Linda flew down later because she originally wasn't planning to go. And I get there and I go to the timeshare. And I did what I thought I've been doing for 20 years. I said, this is Linda Hixson's timeshare. I am her husband, and we want these timeshares that we've got reserved with you. We had 2 or 3 of them. I think we had 3 of them we did. They said we won't do it. I was shocked. I said, wait a minute. I am her husband. I've done this for 20 years. This shouldn't be a problem. My wife was still in the air. And it's 10 o'clock at night. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to get the timeshares, get the people in, and get out of there. Because I was staying somewhere else. They said, nope, she's got to sign it. And they told me why. Now you can gift a timeshare, but if you do that, it's more money and you have to pay extra, and we weren't doing that. Because the way we were doing it, I was stuck. But here is why they wouldn't let me sign the timeshare. That was a week in a resort. They said, we had a man come down here on his wife's timeshare that was in her name, and he brought his girlfriend with him, and they stayed in the wife's timeshare. When I heard that, I just thought, how nasty can you be? How absolutely nasty can people be? I was kind of dumbfounded. And the picture here that I get is God's tough love. God's tough love. And Gomer was into herself, just like that husband was totally into himself. He could care less about his wife, anything about her feelings or finances. And Gomer was into herself. Israel was into herself. All they cared about was financial gain. And God is loving enough to give them tough love, and even more than that, tender. I'd find it awful hard to be tender after something like that, right? But wait till you see the tender love next time. May God help us to grasp what the Lord is to us in His love that is beyond our comprehension. The tough love and the tender love. So next week we'll pick it up with tough, tender love and leave it there. How about you? How about me? The times we've gone astray. God's been tough on us, hasn't He? But He also knows how to be tender. And God help us to not be so infatuated with what's going on around us that we can't stand up against it. Be different. It's an old battle. It's the same one that was going on 3 centuries ago, 4 centuries ago, 5 centuries ago, thousands of years ago, right up to the present time. May God help us to do it. Maybe there's someone you've questioned God's love because things got kind of hard in your life, and he torpedoed your plans. You had your heart set on something, and he torpedoed it, and then he torpedoed something else. You live long enough, you're going to thank God for that. That wasn't part of His best for you, you'll thank Him for it. His tender love will come when you've learned the lessons of tough love. And when we've learned those, we'll be able to stand up against the temptations that carried us away when we were feathers in the wind of temptation. Maybe there's someone that's hearing me that's not saved. You've questioned God's love. You've heard God's love defamed and mocked. Well, I'm here to say, read the book of Hosea, the first 3 chapters, and think if you could love like that. And then go back and try to listen to the people that say God's not as loving as He should be, because He won't give us our way in sin. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son. Wouldn't ignore the sin question, that whoever believes in Him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Father, thank You for the tough love and tender love that You exhibit in our lives and in history to Your people, Israel, and to the churches. As Jesus said, as many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Always the same. We rejoice in him and look for him to come, and the wedding to come, when the bride has made herself ready by your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, ladies. God bless you all for being here tonight. We're thrilled to have you with us. Hope you can fellowship a little bit before you leave. And Lord willing, we'll see you Sunday morning right here for outside service and Sunday night for the same thing. Thank you all.